Hey guys, I'm Pastor Matt, and wanted to do a recap video of week 2 of our Bible study, What is Church? This week we're in the book of Matthew, again, just like last week. Today we're in chapter 5, starting in verse 13. I'm going to read verses 13 through 16. This is what it says. You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt should lose its taste, how can it be made salty? It's no longer good for anything but to be thrown out and trampled on by men. You are the light of the world. A city situated on a hill cannot be hidden. No one lights a lamp and puts it under a basket, but rather on a lampstand, and it gives light to all who are in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before men, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven. You know, sometimes the Bible is weird. Jesus himself is saying the church is salt. He's saying that I am salt and that other believers are salt. So, but what does he mean? What does that mean for me? What does that mean for the church? What does it mean for other believers? So we're going to break that down a little bit. Going word by word, just like we did last week. We'll start with the word you. You are salt, the salt of the earth. Who is Jesus talking to? It said that there was a big crowd of people, and his disciples gathered around him, and he taught them. When it says his disciples, oftentimes people with a long church history like myself will think of the 12 apostles, Jesus' main 12, his closest 12 disciples. But in reality, when we read other parts of the New Testament, we find out that there were a lot more disciples than just those 12 that are named specifically. So we don't know if this is just the 12 or if this is the larger group of people. More importantly, as with everything in the Bible, when it speaks, it's speaking to me. It's speaking to you. So Jesus is saying that you, Christian, you, Jesus follower, you, believer, are the salt of the earth. The next word is are, and that seems like a really simple word, and it is. But if we're not careful, we can miss what Jesus is saying here. He says you are. He does not say you should be. He does not say that you will be. He doesn't say that you can be. He didn't say you're going to be. He says you are. You are already salt if you're a believer. The moment that you accept salvation and through faith in Jesus Christ, you are now salt of the earth. So what is salt? Salt's something we're all familiar with, but what does salt do? As I studied and prepared for this Bible study, there were 4 main properties of salt that I considered. The first one is that it preserves. Even back in Jesus' time and before that, salt was used to preserve meat. It allowed the meat to last longer. The other thing it does is that it adds flavor. Just like with the ham and the bacon, part of that flavor is the salt. But also things like French fries. You know, I like to watch a lot of cooking shows, and one thing that is always being said in there is that you've got to season your food. And the most basic seasonings, salt and pepper, sometimes that's all that these professional chefs recommend. But salt is almost always a part of it because salt adds flavor. Salt's also used in gardening. Maybe you didn't know that. But there are some plants that thrive in a soil that is saltier. Health. Did you know that salt is important to the health, the proper functioning of your body? Yeah, you know, I'm a nurse. I've been a nurse for a long time now, and sodium in your body, if the sodium level gets too low, can cause you some major problems. Something even similar to psychosis. That's right. If you don't have enough salt in your body, you can go crazy, at least for a short period of time. I've seen people hallucinate. You can even lose consciousness and die if your sodium level is too low. Your body needs a certain amount of salt, a certain amount of sodium to function properly. So what does this have to do with the church? I mean, remember the question of this, the point of this Bible study is to answer the question, what is church? Well, if the church is salt, what does that mean? What are we supposed to do because of that knowledge? Well, salt preserves. Church has the power to preserve, to prevent corruption, You know, we look at our society today, and all around us, people inside and outside of the church will admit that we're becoming more and more corrupt, that evil or evil acts seem to be getting more and more frequent and also bigger. The Church of Jesus Christ has the ability to prevent that corruption. But how? How can we do that? Here's the deal. If you take a ham that has not been cured with salt, and you put salt on the table next to it, that ham is going to spoil just as fast as it would if without the salt, because the salt's not in it. Way too many churches, and this has bothered me for as long as I've been in ministry, way too many churches are separated from the culture of their communities. We have to be in our communities if we're going to make a difference, if we're going to preserve, if we're going to add flavor, if we're going to have an impact on our communities. We have to be part of our communities. But way too many churches now, we gather on Sunday morning, and seldom are we willing to go out into the community where people are. But if we're to preserve, if we're to be salt, then we have to be where the people are. Because that ham, if the salt is not added, it cannot preserve the ham. Likewise, if you've ever been to McDonald's, I think McDonald's has the best French fries anywhere. You drive by McDonald's and you can smell the French fries and you immediately know what it is. But have you ever gotten them when they forgot to salt them? You know, we can certainly argue over how much is the right amount of salt, but 0 is not the right amount. And if there's no salt in them fries, it's just bad. Our communities need the salt that Jesus is saying we are. Now, Jesus says in here also that if the salt is to become no longer salty, he says right here, it's no longer good for anything but to be thrown out and trampled on by men. Church, if you're no longer salty, then Jesus is saying that you're of no use. Not diminishing your value as a person or as a child of God, but you're of no use to your community if you're no longer salty. How do you remain salty? Jesus says in John chapter 15, verse 5, he says, I am the vine, you are the branches. The one who remains in me and I in him produces much fruit, because you can do nothing without me. If anyone does not remain in me, he is thrown aside like a branch and he withers. So Jesus is saying here, the way to remain salty, the way to produce fruit, the way to make sure that you're still useful to your community is to remain in Jesus. Because, just like I said in last week's video, it's all about Jesus. It is Jesus' church, not mine. And the moment that I try to do things in my own power, without trusting in Jesus to do things I cannot do, the moment that I turn away from Jesus and stop listening to his instruction, then I am no longer remaining in Jesus. And Jesus said that I will be cast aside and I will wither because I will bear no fruit. If I looked at you and said, stay salty, that may have a negative connotation. Sometimes if you're kind of grumpy about a circumstance, then you may say you're salty, or somebody may accuse you of being salty, and that's not what I'm talking about. Stay salty by staying in Jesus Christ, and we'll see you next week.